Hey everyone, today we're going to be ranking all of the killers from least to most intelligent. For some characters I'm going to count in strategy and survival as part of intelligence, as obviously the killers in the game have such a wide variety of experiences. Some live out in the woods, secluded and alone, others basically exist in the modern day, and some are completely otherworldly. So with that in mind, let's get into it. For our least intelligent character I'm going to say Nemesis, as his intelligence essentially comes from the Nemesis alpha parasite. And so, although he can still speak and take orders as a bioweapon, he was created for the purpose of serving and destruction. I think for the sole fact this guy is essentially running off of a parasite, he is the least intelligent character. When he hunts Jill in RE3, he seems quite incompetent in terms of strategy, despite the large arsenal of weaponry and physical abilities that he has. He has plenty of chances to kill her, but he always seems to just mess it up, largely due to the lack of intelligence it seems. Demogorgon I want to mention next, as it's either the least intelligent tier or one of the most intelligent due to it basically being an extension of the Mind Flayer. Looking at it purely as a creature though, it's simply a killing machine taking orders, much like Nemesis is, and so therefore likely lacking intelligence of any kind, aside if you were to classify its battle proficiency as a form of strategy and intelligence, but personally I think that's just more down to its physical toughness and inbuilt weaponry, over using this weaponry in a skilled or intelligent way. A bit above Nemesis though, because it does seem to have some competence due to the Mind Flayer giving it orders, and also because of its use of portals, to strategically spread through areas and overtake them. Leatherface and Hillbilly lack intelligence largely due to being mistreated by their family, leading them to be overly defensive in their adult years due to their skewed perception of the world as a result of their abuse. The only difference between these two is that Hillbilly seems to gain more enjoyment out of killing, whereas Leatherface becomes incredibly upset after killing someone. Either way though, their intelligence levels appear to be about on par with one another. Their strategy to defend their land is to basically just rev up the chainsaw and sprint after the person. So, you know, gauge their intelligence as you will, but it doesn't seem like they are particularly smart people. Legion are presented as quite reckless and careless teenagers. There is maybe an argument to split characters like Susie from the rest of the group, as she seems to display some kind of academic success. However, broadly as a group they seem about as intelligent as your average college or pre-college student would be. They do stuff like vandalize cars, steal different things, and cause road traffic collisions also. This could be argued as a form of intelligence, as they manage to evade any consequence for a while, but I think it's more just the fact that Ormond is a very quiet and low-key place, likely without a substantial police force to stop this stuff. When it comes to their worst deed, their murder of a store clerk, they're very panicked and incredibly sloppy, supposedly not cleaning anything up and then attempting to bury the body near the place where they usually hang out, which, you know, isn't exactly the best move. It seems to me that they get away by sheer dumb luck, and when they finally do something really horrendous, their lack of intelligence shows. However, they are still likely somewhat educated as about college-age teens, with some academic outliers like Susie. Hag is portrayed in the lore as not the smartest, to be honest. She's told repeatedly to not mess with the hexes, but then she just carries on doing it, despite the bad consequences it eventually has. You can't blame her to an extent, as she is just being inquisitive. She begins using the hexes because she's failing at school too, so not only does she mess with powerful magic that has horrible consequences, but she was doing it because of her failures at school. It feels really harsh to say these younger and just less experienced characters are not intelligent, but just based on what we know about her, it does kinda seem that way. After becoming the Hag, it seems like her intelligence mostly rides on her use of the hexes. Hag is slightly higher than the Legion, as she does display some cunning with use of her hexes to escape her captors. Spirit seems like a harsh one to rank because there's not much to go on due to her dying very young and becoming a spirit, but basically prior to getting taken by the entity, she was an underperforming college student who doesn't appear particularly great at anything and pretty average all round. Her intelligence to me therefore seems to be about as much as your average college student or young adult. Her lack of experience and her lack of time essentially in the world means she's probably not too smart yet, which just makes her story even sadder to be honest. Not that age always equates to intelligence or anything. Trickster displays intelligence partly just for the fact that he becomes quite successful as a performer. He loses points however due to the fact that his murders during his tours are incredibly obvious and easily discovered by Yunjin. He's clearly sloppy and doesn't care about what he leaves behind. It really depends on how much weight you put into his artistry, I guess you'd call it, but I don't think he's the smartest guy ever, especially due to his obsession with wanting to create a specific kind of music music that leads to his downfall. Shape is displayed to not be that smart in the films, and is clearly much more concerned with killing than he is getting caught or trying to cover his tracks. He's pretty obvious with it, and generally he only gets away for so long because he appears to have some degree of supernatural ability. The only way I think his intelligence is clearly displayed is through his stalking, where he appears to try and get a good sense of his victims before he attacks them. It's pretty messed up, but that definitely displays that he's at least slightly intelligent in his approach and planning. He also has moments like escaping from prison that show he does have some competence also in strategy, it seems. It's hard to tell though when looking at those deep void-like eyes. Nurse is in a similar situation to Hag, where she just doesn't really display any point where she is intelligent to suggest that she is. She further shows that she's quite easily manipulated by the Broken Woman during her tome lore, who basically gets her to start killing off the people of the asylum. Although this could very easily be put down to her overwhelming trauma, and less to do with the fact that she lacks intelligence. It is worth noting, however, that even though she is mentioned to not be a real or trained nurse, she does clearly pick up some skill when on the job for the decades that she works at Crotus Pren. These more than likely include medical procedures and care, which are definitely things that would require intelligence to take on. We can also assume that as the nurse is around the age of 40, that she's seen quite a bit and has simply picked up more knowledge due to her being alive longer. Clown is kinda similar to Trickster in that he's said to be very sloppy in terms of his killing and in cleaning up his tracks, but he has a specific skill that sets him apart and shows that he's somewhat competent and intelligent. This is of course his ability to create his concoctions made of muscle relaxants and anesthetics. He perfects these mixtures with his afterpiece tonic, which is what he uses in-game as his main power. Again, this is what sets him apart and shows that he isn't completely incompetent. It's more down to the fact that he gets into alcohol, junk food and more that he appears to lack intelligence. However, I think his creation of the afterpiece tonic specifically shows otherwise. In that area only though. Huntress I don't think is not intelligent in every way, as she is clearly very adept at survival and such, using brutality and also strategy to take down squadrons of soldiers. However, not so much in terms of conventional intelligence. She does things in the lore like show that she doesn't understand the physical needs of a child, and so they die as a result. It's really hard to pin how smart she is, as again, she takes down literal squadrons of soldiers and whole towns full of people, but then she doesn't understand the needs of a child, or basically a human being, which is kinda strange, especially as she herself is one. Regardless, she survives alone for possibly around 2 or so decades, which is quite the feat, using her knowledge of the woods and her skills to fight off lots of intruders. So, in her own context, she's pretty smart. Pig is displayed in a strange way, as both clever in some instances, but also quite reckless in others, getting carried away with jealousy or anger. In the Saw film, she does manage to assist Jone with some quite elaborate traps, especially in Saw 2. She further overcomes multiple of the traps herself, showing her competence in understanding situations for what they are and dealing with them. Her downside is that it seems much of her appearing intelligence stems mainly from Jone's inventions and orders, over her direct input. She's always being tested, and therefore I think she does lack the same autonomy that many of the other killers appear to have. However, the fact that she still carries out many of these elaborate schemes and they actually work does show a good level of intelligence for sure, especially due to her understanding of them. Twins' intelligence is somewhat hard to gauge, but I think Charlotte especially is quite intelligent, at least in terms of survival. She manages to survive on her own as a child all the way to being a young adult, all while she is constantly being hunted down by a cult and basically anyone she encountered. You have to be quite incredibly skilled and intelligent to survive that. Victor is where this pair falls down, as he appears to be incredibly reckless and often aggressive, to the point where it gets him killed. So Charlotte is kind of carrying this one, but I think she especially is quite evidently intelligent. Not necessarily in the conventional sense, but intelligent nonetheless. Unlike Huntress, she's constantly traveling as well. She's not staying in the same area for most of the time, meaning she's always surviving in unknown land, basically. Wraith is presented as quite an emotionally intelligent person who seems to understand the people around him, as well as the feelings of others quite clearly. He knows when something is up with his parents as well as his grandmother. Then when he goes to America and works for AZHYMOVS, he instantly sees that he's not a great guy, and is clearly up to some dodgy stuff. He also displays a degree of cunning and intelligence when he kills the soldiers in his tome lore, sneaking into their camp at night and using some gas to burn them, knowing he can't take them head on as a child. Wraith has a pretty rough time throughout his life, and it's kinda hard to decide just how intelligent he is, but from the few instances we have, it seems like he is, and the situations where he appears to lack intelligence is more due to him wanting to not get involved over him not understanding a situation, which arguably makes him more intelligent. It just ends up that this doesn't really work out for him, and seemingly the entity had it out for him for quite a while. Trapper's intelligence can largely be put down to his clear understanding and unveiling of people. As a child, he can see through his father's lies easily, and quickly concludes that he murdered his mother and uncle. Further, he is evidently a good hunter and strategic in that sense also. He wears the skull of a bear as his mask, meaning he's taken down bears, or at least managed to trap them. He's skilled with his traps and knows the lay of his land clearly. We can further see cunning in moments such as when he traps over 100 of his workers in the mines, to make it look like an accident, but also to get rid of all of them at once. Again, messed up, but it's better than, say, Nurse's method of just grabbing a bone saw and going on a bit of a riot. Executioner and Freddy I want to kind of put together. Freddy, as messed up as it is largely shown to be intelligent due to his manipulation and tormenting of people through the dream world. Out of the dream world, and before being a dream demon, he doesn't seem that intelligent, and seems to be about as smart as your average person. However, as a dream demon, he has clearly gained a much better insight of some kind into the human mind, as he manages to torment people, finding their true fears and exploiting them. You could argue that his Dead by Daylight iteration doesn't directly show this in gameplay, but lore-wise this is definitely the case. It's worth noting though that this doesn't mean he's entirely intelligent in every aspect, just that he's very good and skilled in this one area, probably more so than anyone else in the game, which is what makes him so high up this list. In a similar way, Executioner does this same thing, by seemingly being intelligent in his method of dispensing punishment and making people repent for things they've done. He has different goals to Freddy, but I think they're both on that same equal level of just excelling in this one area of punishment of some kind, through means of pain, with their powers largely stemming from supernatural means. I would probably put Executioner a little higher just for the fact that he's entirely supernatural and seemingly immortal or endless, suggesting he has a much larger track record as it were. Deathslinger is proven to be very intelligent in the lore, especially for someone of his time period, inventing lots of things, one of them being the spear gun. The spear gun was used to catch lots of outlaws, and generally was just a pretty effective weapon for the job it was supposed to fulfill. He's known as somewhat of a young prodigy in terms of his inventions. I think his intelligence only does extend to his inventions though, as throughout his lore he gets manipulated and used by many people, and often it seems to be his trust of others that gets him down bad. Both of the main people he works for, Henry Bayshaw and the prison warden, are just using him, although it's difficult as they are both in higher positions of power over him. Broadly, I would say Slinger seems to be quite intelligent though, and the lore seems to constantly reinforce that he is intelligent. Oni is kind of in the area of being hard to place, as most of his lore is just him going off on a rampage and massacring people. He is mentioned to be a good strategist, and generally a proficient and intelligent fighter, as he takes down hundreds of opponents, some of them even being samurai. We can further note that he is emotionally there also to some degree, due to his sadness over the death of his father and the love he seems to have for his son. It is hard to really pull apart just what is his overwhelming strength and rage though, and what is actually him intelligently using his weapons. It seems like both from the lore, and therefore this guy as a literal warlord is intelligent, but largely in terms of war or battle essentially. I feel like Oni is a lot like Trapper, just on a much bigger scale. Plague is a high achiever and seemingly intelligent person who works their way up from basically nothing to being the High Priestess of Babylon. Her ability to do this so quickly, largely due to her unwavering faith and the belief she herself puts in people. We have to assume she is intelligent. She further displays intelligence by leaving Babylon after her infection to try and do anything she can to appease the gods and save the city. Reasonably, back in ancient Babylon, they weren't exactly going to find a cure or anything, so this is a good idea really. I think however it's more the political aspect of her personality, where she manages to climb to such a high standing despite starting off in life with nothing, being thrown at the temple steps as a child, and then becoming High Priestess as an adult, and a young one at that. Cenobite is kind of on the same ground as Freddy, in the sense that he's just very intelligent in one really messed up area. It's hard to judge his true intelligence though, as Pinhead is his iteration from the original 1987 film, where I don't feel he displays much intelligence aside seeming powerful and largely in control control of the situation. Again, I think a bit like Freddy, he's just very intelligent in regards to manipulating people, and specifically in his methods of torture. At the same time, this doesn't mean he's necessarily intelligent. I think he does do this to a better or greater extent than Freddy even, and so I'm putting him higher here. He's another that is hard to decide the true intelligence of though, but is also constantly reinforced to be someone of high intelligence. Ghostface is constantly mentioned to be intelligent and meticulous in the way he goes about things throughout his lore. Ghosty went from town to town murdering people and then writing about these murders in the local paper. Doing that without getting caught does show that he's intelligent in the way he goes about doing what he does. It mentions in his lore that he would stalk victims for weeks, registering their habits and routines, picking up on all these small details to make sure everything went to plan, and he didn't get caught. In the end, he doesn't get caught either. He reveals himself as the killer in Roseville, then plans to move to the next town to begin again. It's only the entity's intervention in taking him that actually puts a stop to him. So yeah, this guy is pretty scary, largely due to his incredibly strategic and meticulous approach. Doctor is a character who I actually think has quite an overrated level of intelligence. As a doctor, he immediately seems like he would be the highest, but he's more sadistic and manipulative than intelligent. Intelligence through his manipulation could be argued, sure, but he doesn't display that he's an intelligent person as a whole, just that he is very good at toying with the human mind, specifically with use of electricity. He is also a qualified doctor though, who was specifically sought after by the CIA, meaning he still is definitely very intelligent, especially as we learn that he develops different interrogation methods in order to get information out of people, which he appears to do successfully. He's still very high up here, but I think his over-sadistic nature means his intelligence is stunted somewhat. I personally think that Blight is the most intelligent killer in the game, as he not only essentially makes a super soldier serum, but he also manages to forcibly break into the entity's realm by basically annoying the entity into letting him in. Blight is a trained doctor prior to his recruitment during the Opium War. He then creates this serum that increases a person's physical resistance. It does kill a bunch of people, but the serum seems to work. He then gets recruited once more to break into the entity's realm. And again, he does it. He has unconventional and messed up methods, but he shows skill and intelligence in multiple areas, largely scientific, and achieves his goals in one way or another. He's beaten down a few times, but through his endless tests, research and more, he eventually does it. Breaking into the entity's realm is quite an impressive feat, to be fair. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and please do drop your own thoughts on this list down below. Thanks, and goodbye.